The NFL trade deadline is quickly approaching for the Detroit Lions. They have just under 2 weeks to decide if they want to be buyers at the deadline or sellers to get rid of some of their players for future draft capital. And by a lot of rumors and from a lot of NFL sources, it seems the Lions have been linked to being buyers at the NFL trade deadline. Now, this is not new for Brad Holmes. He bought at the trade deadline last year with Darius Smith. He traded for Donovan Peoples-Jones the year prior, and really every year outside of 2021, Brad Holmes has made a trade for a player at the NFL deadline. That makes a lot of people believe that this year will follow a similar trend. The Lions have been linked to several players this season, most notably of which is Jaelan Phillips of the Miami Dolphins. However, this trade doesn't make a lot of sense for the Lions. It doesn't make a lot of sense for the Lions pass rush. It doesn't make a lot of sense for the Lions defense. It doesn't make a lot of sense for their defensive line room. And today we're going to talk about exactly why that is. Now, taking a look at the offseason narrative, this has followed the Lions into the NFL year. Throughout the offseason, it was said that the Lions need an edge rusher. They needed Darius Smith. They needed Trey Hendrickson. They needed to trade for Myles Garrett. They needed a pass rusher outside of Aidan Hutchinson, and that they have no depth, that the pass rush is poor, and that they just can't win games without making a trade for a second elite defensive lineman. Now, while the narrative may persist, the numbers tell you the exact opposite story. Throughout the 2025 season, the Detroit Lions currently rank 7th in the NFL in pressures. They rank 9th in the NFL in hurries. They rank 4th in the NFL in sacks, while being just 12th in the NFL on blitz percentage, meaning they're only rushing 4 guys at a time, and they're still getting home. They're still getting to the quarterback and ending drives better than most teams across the NFL. As I said, ranking 4th in the NFL in sacks, which is a huge jump from a season ago. And it comes from a lot of individual efforts and a lot of great play from the individuals on the defensive line. Aidan Hutchinson currently has 6 sacks on his season, ranking 6th in the NFL. Al-Qaeda Muhammad is 1 sack behind him with 5, ranking him 10th in the NFL, tied with Micah Parsons. Derek Barnes and Jack Campbell both have 3 sacks on the NFL season. Despite not blitzing a ton, they have been very effective when they are asked to do so. Alex Anzalone has a sack and a half, as does Tyrus Wheat, a player that was joining the Detroit Lions late into the preseason process, was a waiver wire pickup before week 1. Trevor Nowaske has a sack, Marcus Davenport has a sack, and Brian Branch does as well. This team is getting to the quarterback fairly consistently. They had 7 sacks on Lamar Jackson, and outside of the first week against the Green Bay Packers, I don't believe the Detroit Lions have failed to get to the quarterback in any week other than week 1. They've had multiple sacks in every single game this season outside of Green Bay, and the pass rush has taken a massive step forward from they were a season ago. To put into comparison where they are now versus where they were, last season the Detroit Lions finished the season with 36 sacks. Aidan Hutchinson had 7.5 through 5 games, but outside of that, no other player on the team contributed more than 3 throughout the remainder of their season. At this point, Al-Qaeda Muhammad would already be second on the team in sacks last season for the Detroit Lions had he put up these numbers. Derek Barnes would have been tied for second place on the team in sacks, as would Jack Campbell. The Lions have 23 team sacks through 7 games this season, and they had 37 through 17 games a year ago. So the pass rush massively improved, nearly doubling their production from a year ago. They will be a very good football team as they move forward on the defensive side of things. Now, taking a look at the current depth chart for the Lions, Aidan Hutchinson and out are your obvious starters, with, of course, Tyrus Wheat being your edge rusher 3, with Pat O'Connor and Tyler Lacey both getting reps on the edge as well, playing primarily more run-stopping roles than pass rushing roles, but still contributing to that defensive line and that edge rushing group as much as humanly possible. On top of that, the Detroit Lions have several players on injury reserve, physically unable to perform list, or just on injury settlements that will return by the end of the year, but are not currently contributing. Those players are, of course, Josh Paschal, who I actually thought would have been back by the end of September, but seems to not be the case. He should be back at least by the end of the season and potentially within the next couple of weeks. Ahmed Hassanein is looking to recover from his pectoral injury. He could potentially return in the second half of the NFL season, as could Marcus Davenport. His injury was talked about as being a not quite season ending, but certainly one that would take a bit of time to heal. He could potentially return around the final month of the season as the Lions get into January football, and they add back a really good 6'6" edge rusher that can stop the run and get to the quarterback. Now, where does that leave the Detroit Lions? Lions? Well, despite the depth chart looking a little bit weak, they really aren't as weak as many people would believe. Despite only having two true edge rushers on the roster, being Aidan Hutchinson and Al-Qaeda Muhammad, Tyrus Wheat has played that role quite well and had a sack and a half on Monday Night Football. Pat O'Connor has played that role very well, like we talked about, and even Tyler Lacey has made a couple plays in the run game, but hasn't quite got to the quarterback as of yet. That has led a lot of Detroit Lions fans naturally to think that the edge rushing group just isn't good enough. Despite being 4th in the NFL in sacks and 7th in the NFL in pressures while not blitzing a ton, of course, that is not good enough for Detroit Lions fans. So what else would they rather do than trade for an injury-prone edge rusher that hasn't played a full season in 2 entire years? Yes. Despite the Detroit Lions fans being so pessimistic about Marcus Davenport, so pessimistic about Aidan Hutchinson coming into the year, so pessimistic about every single player that has ever suffered an injury, they are drooling at the idea of adding Jaelan Phillips, a former first-round pick who, in the 2021 class, was selected 18th overall. Now, he is 26 years old, has 25 sacks to his name in 53 career games, 171 tackles, 1 forced fumble, 4 fumble recoveries, and 7 TF. That is good. He is a good football player, and I'm not here to tell you that he is a bad football player, but it does seem a little strange to me that despite the Detroit Lions fans being so cautious of injuries, being so pessimistic, as I said, about all of the injuries that the Lions suffered a season ago, and all of this narrative that Brad Holmes only signs and hires people with injury-riddled histories, that they are so excited to add a player like Jaelan Phillips. Yes, Jaelan Phillips is very talented. He averages a half a sack nearly every single game that he plays in Miami, and with Miami being 1-7, they could potentially be having a fire sale, getting rid of their star young edge rusher for a very reasonable and valuable price on the market. The problem is, Jaelan Phillips hasn't played a full season in 3 entire years. And in fact, he hasn't played more than 8 games since 2022. In 2023, he tore his Achilles after just 8 games of his NFL year and was done for the year. He came back next season and tore his ACL in just 4 games. He's played 12 games over the last 2 seasons. And while he has been healthy in 2025, he hasn't really been this dominant edge rusher that I think a lot of people imagine him being at the college level. He's not necessarily the great player he was at Miami anymore. He's not necessarily the greatest player in the NFL to trade for at the edge rusher position. And even if you go back to his Miami days, if you go back to his UCL days, he medically retired for a couple of years because of his concussion history. He came into the NFL, played 2 pretty solid rookie and sophomore seasons, getting 7 and 8 sacks respectively, but then he tore his Achilles, then he tore his ACL. He hasn't proven he can be healthy going all the way back to high school, going all the way back to college. He hasn't been a healthy NFL player outside of really his rookie season, his sophomore season, and I guess as far as this point go, this season. He's played 7 games in 2025, 19 tackles, 2 TFLs, 2 sacks, and a fumble recovery. Despite playing a significantly larger role in the defense for Miami, he has just a half a sack more than Tyrus Wheat, not Tyler Lacey. Tyrus Wheat, a player that was a practice squad player, a player that was a waiver wire pickup before week 1, has just half a sack less than Jaelan Phillips. Now, Jaelan Phillips is still young. He's 6'5", 245 pounds, 26 years old, and when he's been on the field, he's been pretty healthy, but he's just Marcus Davenport. He is a big player with big time upside that's been productive when he's been on the field, but he can't consistently stay on the field. Season-ending injuries over and over and over again, to the point where is it really worth contributing to a cap hit of $13 million to have a player that may not end the season healthy, right? A lot of people are going to say, well, Marcus Davenport hasn't proven he can be healthy either. That is very true. Marcus Davenport cost the Detroit Lions $1.2 million. Jaelan Phillips, should he be traded to Detroit, would cost the Lions $13 million against the cap while being essentially the edge rusher 3 for Detroit, because he's not going to take Al-Qaeda Muhammad off the field. He's certainly not going to take Aidan Hutchinson off the field. So he's going to be rotating as an edge rusher 3 with Tyrus Wheat. When Josh Paschal comes back, he might not even play over Josh Paschal. When Ahmed Hassanein comes back, he may not play over Ahmed Hassanein, as they might want to get the young players some reps at that position. And when Marcus Davenport comes back at the end of the year, come playoff time, he's not going to play over Marcus Davenport. Trading for an edge rusher for Detroit does not make sense. And of all the players the Lions could potentially trade for, Jaelan Phillips makes the least amount of sense for this football team. Now, I'm not saying the Lions shouldn't be buyers at the trade deadline. I'm not saying they shouldn't even trade for some help on the defensive line. But when you look at the future, when you look past this week for the Detroit Lions, their team is good. Their edge rushing group is good. Aidan Hutchinson is one of the best pass rushers in the NFL. Al-Quadin Muhammad has been one of the best edge rusher twos across the NFL this year, one of the best pass rushing partners of any team as the second option on the pass rush. Tyrus Wheat has played good football. Pat O'Connor has played good football. Tyler Lacey has played good football. We know Josh Paschal can play good football when he returns. We know Ahmed Hassanein, at least from what we saw in the preseason, can play really good football from what we saw in camp, what we saw in limited reps this season. And we know Marcus Davenport, when he's healthy, is a solid contributor to this defense. This is a team that will get healthy at the right time. They're facing a lot of injuries in the secondary right now, but the pass rush, the edge rushers, the defensive line is getting healthy as we move through this NFL season. They are going to welcome back not one, not two, but three starting caliber, well, maybe two with Ahmed Hassanein being a question mark, two starting caliber defensive linemen to this edge rushing group already in the next couple of months by time we get to the postseason. Jaelan Phillips doesn't have a spot on this roster. And honestly, I don't think anybody else really has a spot on this roster. If they're cheap, if they're, an older veteran who's been productive, that's going to cost the Lions just a few $1,000,000 in a day 3 pick, that would be one thing. But Jaelan Phillips would genuinely cost the Detroit Lions likely a day 2 selection, whether it be rounds 3 or rounds 2. He would cost them $13 million this season as a rental, and a rental that they just really don't need at this point in the NFL season. So to me, this trade rumor doesn't make a lot of sense. It doesn't make a ton of sense schematically. It doesn't make a ton of sense just personnel-wise. It doesn't make a lot of sense financially. There aren't a lot of reasons that I can think of that the Lions would want to add Jaelan Phillips to this roster. Is he a good football player? Yes, absolutely. But is he a football player that would be worth it for the Detroit Lions? No, he is not. So with that being said, that is all I have for you guys today. We're going to talk more about the trade deadline as it approaches, as the Lions go through their bye week. Should the Lions make a trade? Should they be buyers? Should they be sellers? The answer to that question is up in the air, and there are options for both sides, but Jaelan Phillips is not the answer. Jaelan Phillips is not an answer for the Detroit Lions. It doesn't make any sense. So with that being said, that is all I have for you guys today. Let me know down in the comments below your opinions on this trade. Do you want the Lions to do it? Do you want them to go all in at Jaelan Phillips? Do you want them to try to potentially sign a different player like an Arden Key, maybe a more low-key type of signing? I'd love to hear your guys' opinions down in the comments below. And if you disagree, let me know. I'd love to hear a counter-argument for why Jaelan Phillips fits with Detroit. But as of right now, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me. So with that being said, that's all I got for you guys right now. Thank you all so much for watching. And until next time, and as always, go Lions!